Sure. Madam Clerk, could I ask you to do the roll call, please?
Mr. Pringle? Mr. Mackey?
Present.
Mr. Barfoot?
Present.
Mr. Burley? Present. Mr. McQueen? Mr. Halliday?
Present.
Ms. Patterson?
Present.
Mr. Hicks? Here. Ms. Clumpus? Present. Mr. Greenfield? Present. Mr. Body? Present. Ms. Wright? Here. Ms. Fosbrook?
Present.
Mr. Jack? Present. Mr. McKean? Present. Ms. Ardell? Here. Mr. Eccles?
Counted for.
And Mr. Bell?
Present. Okay, thanks, everyone. We have two sets of minutes before us. If I could get a mover for the Warden's Forum minutes, please. Moved by Councillor Bell, second by Councillor Burley. Information sent out to everyone regarding any missed names on that. Any further discussion then regarding the Warden's Forum minutes? Call the vote, and all in favor? Opposed of any? That's carried. Next, we have the the County Council minutes and Committee of the Whole minutes for April 27th. Can I have a mover put those on the floor, please, by Councillor Hicks, second by Councillor Greenfield. Any further discussion then on those minutes? Councillor McQueen.
Just a point of minutes arising from that, I guess, and we don't have that on our agenda, but I did ask about an opportunity for all of County Council to have a tour of the new building. I don't know if that's going to be considered at a certain time.
It is, actually. We did discuss it and are working towards working with the... Dr. Anne Marie, did you want to...
It looks like it'll probably be our second meeting in June. Then they'll have some internal walls and things up for us to actually see.
Okay, any further discussion then on those minutes? Okay, we'll call the vote then. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Then is Board of Health report. Can I have a mover to put those on the floor, please, by Councillor Patterson, second by Councillor Body. Fair bit of information in there, really, regarding those meetings. Any questions or concerns? I tried to do a summary and able to come up with a lot. Dr. Kennedy, do you see anything really from it, from really points to bring forward, or?
Other than to bring council up to date, that the province has recently been moving on their opioid strategy, and we're hoping with the new national guidelines around opiate use for non-cancer, non-palliative pain will be a great addition to the tool sets that our providers have at their disposal for limiting the amount of opioids that are in our communities and prescribed. So that is a good move forward.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Warden. I do have a couple of comments.
Sure.
During those meetings, Dr. Kennedy advised the board that the public health teams are available for community events throughout Grey Bruce for speaking engagements at community meetings or municipal council meetings, and of course the school board meetings. So you're welcome to contact Dr. Kennedy for a speaking engagement. The health unit averages 500 calls per year outside normal business hours, and I want everybody to be aware that the medical officer of health or a designate is available in an emergent situation or an emergency. There is a process in place that an inspector or an on-call manager is available. And if required, Dr. Kennedy has a mutual backup with Perth County, Huron, or Elgin St. Thomas, and this is a pre-arranged backup for vacation or conferences. And the Board of Health report in your package includes the 2016 program review. There are 17 client services, and I encourage you to take a look at these. It explains a lot about what the public health unit does. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. Any further discussion then regarding the motion?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I was wondering if I could ask Dr. Kennedy, I'm on the task force for the legalization of marijuana, and we've had a meeting last week, and medical officers of health throughout the province have concerns on the legalization. I'm just wondering, to Dr. Kennedy, I didn't notice in any of the minutes if there was any talk on the legalization, and what we are proposing in Grey County for what's going to be transposing from the feds down to the province and then to the municipalities, because this will cost the municipalities money. And I'm just wondering, have you looked at that? Have you got a game plan, or what's happening?
Sure. We've been actually looking at it since it was announced 2 years ago within the platform of the federal election. We have an internal committee, mostly of public health nurses, who do feed in also to the provincial public health nurses council/subcommittee. And they have produced 2 documents to date, which are available on our website with regards to breastfeeding in early childhood and exposure. We're working with the task force on crystal meth and other substances task force going forward, as well as the SIMS group locally within the counties. So that's substance-involved mothers. So we are definitely looking at it and producing evidence-based documentation to help support the decision makers, both at all tiers of government. It's going to be a work in progress, though, because we are lacking some evidence. Public Health Ontario is well aware of this and has initiated several research initiatives and portfolios. We have not yet received any reports from that work, but we anticipate it will be shortly. So stay tuned. We're well on top of it. And should there be any other questions that specific municipalities, we have fielded many questions from long-term care facilities within the county, most especially. Occupational exposures are also of a great concern in our facilities. And we're working right now case by case, but hopefully we will be provided with some provincial guidance shortly.
And it's just that the feds are rolling this out very, very quickly. I have another meeting on Monday regarding this. We're going to be meeting every week for the next 6 weeks, just because of what's happening. So I just want us to be aware it's going to happen very quickly, and as a medical officer of health for Grey County, we need to be on top of this, and we need to be looking at funding, because I think we need to have public education, because it is going to be expensive for municipalities to enforce and go through with this. So I'm just letting everybody aware, we will keep in contact with everybody as to what is happening, but we are going to be meeting weekly for the next 6 weeks. Those are just my comments on that.
Okay, thank you for that update. Any other further discussion then on those Board of Health minutes? Okay, we'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Now down to bylaws. We have 7 bylaws before you. Briefly run through them. The first one then is regarding, need a mover to put them on the floor to start with by Councillor Burley, second by Councillor Eccles. First one then is regarding amendment to the county official plan regarding the issue in Southgate. Second one then is regarding the SWIFT that was discussed last week at Committee of the Whole. Third issue is the bylaw regarding lands in the municipality of Meaford. And the fourth is regarding an easement between County of Grey and City of Owen Sound. That one has also been discussed a few times at Committee of the Whole. And then the last 3 are regarding tax ratios. So, Councillor Fosbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. In relation to the first item, 4973-17, Official Plan Amendment 136 in Southgate, I would just like to reiterate my concern. At the last meeting, this went through committee, and I was disappointed to find out that there was no acknowledgement of a petition brought forward by the residents affected by this. So I would just like to maintain my concern that it doesn't seem to have been any further acknowledgement.
All due respect, I mean, that was noted within minutes of that, your concern?
My concern is that the petition wasn't acknowledged when it was gone through committee, and I haven't seen any further acknowledgement since, and I would just like to, on behalf of the people that are concerned,
Okay.
reiterate that. Thank you.
Councillor McKean?
Yes, thank you. Through the warden, maybe the planning, I know that at that meeting where we discussed this, there was a bit of a conversation went on about the noise attenuation between the properties and what that would take a look like. There was talk about earth and berm and tree planting. I just wondered if we could maybe have had maybe one of the planners speak to that, please.
Okay, Randy?
Thank you. Good question through you, Mr. Warden. These are something that we can address through the site plan process. We'll have some further discussions with the township planner and make sure some of those comments that we received at the last committee of the whole are addressed through that site plan process.
Thank you.
Councillor Bell?
Yes, Mr. Warden, I neglected to say I do have a pecuniary interest on that first bylaw.
Okay, any further discussion? Ready for the vote? We'll call the vote then on all 7 bylaws. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. Okay, I'll now ask for an adjournment of County Council. I can move by Councillor Halliday, second by Councillor Wright. All in favor? That's carried. So that concludes the council portion of our meeting. We now move into Committee of the Whole. So we'll call the Committee of the Whole to order. Any declaration of pecuniary interest? Business arising from the minutes, we had the motion regarding Canada's 150th. Sorry. Yep, we had the motion regarding Canada's 150th anniversary. So I have a mover then to put that motion on the floor for discussion. Moved by Councillor Halliday, second by Councillor Jack. So from information that was brought forward at that meeting, and then with some staff work and discussion regarding some of the municipalities, this is the motion then that has come forward for discussion. So we'll open the floor now for discussion. So really what's the gist of this is to put the figure then to $2,000 per municipality to come from county funds, and noting the fact that Hanover and West Grey then have received their $2,000 already. Okay, and we just ask that if all councillors could speak directly into their mics, just so that we can make sure the information, probably for today's session anyway, it'd be best if everyone stayed seated, and that way you can get closer to your mic then to be able to relay that information. So, Councillor Patterson?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would just like to comment that considering the issue, I think this is the fairest way for County Council to decide. However, if it had been before the fact that Hanover Council supported the snowbirds, we probably would have given a lesser amount to the airport and used that money for our own Canada Day celebrations. But I will reiterate, this is the fairest way for County Council to decide.
Councillor Halliday?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Warden, and my fellow councillors. I brought forward this motion and had some help from some other councillors deciding at the level of which we thought that $2,000 was more than adequate. Ray Hallens yesterday passed a motion that if we are successful in obtaining this, that we are going to purchase for all the students in Grey Highlands a Canada 150 pin, which will have roughly a cost of about $1.20. So we have about 1,830 students in Grey Highlands, so we've set up a committee that will purchase the pins and distribute those pins to all the students in Grey Highlands. So we think it's a good cause, and it's very important that that Canada's 150th birthday be recognized by the youth of our community. We do have many grants that have come from other sources, such as fireworks, etc. But we think this is a special grant that can be utilized to, for our students. Thank you.
Okay. Other discussion? Councillor Hicks.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would like to add on to the comments by Councillor Patterson. We supported the Saugeen Municipal Airport and the snowbirds coming to our region, and we did that in the context of a discussion at that time with information that we had at that time. What this proposal seeks to do is to impose a condition that was not known at the time. Had we known at the time, Hanover may not have given $5,000 on its own, which we have done, to the snowbird event. And so now we're saying, well, this is a fair way to do it, and I agree it's a fair way to do it, but it says, well, you've already given your $2,000, you've received your $2,000, and you've given it to the snowbirds. Well, now that would be Hanover essentially given $5,000, which we've already given, and that was a decision made by Hanover Council, but now it says you're going to give another $2,000 because your share has already been given. And that's not what was discussed at the time that we made the decision to give the money from this council to the snowbirds, to the Saugeen Municipal Airport. So with great respect, and we're not talking huge dollars here, I'm just saying, with great respect, had we known that at the time, you know, that would have been one thing. But to suggest now with this motion that we're going to say, well, you've already given it, we've given it to you, and you chose to give it to the snowbirds, not a fair. And that's what this motion is seeking to do. So if I would have to respectfully vote against this motion because of just that one little piece. I don't want to vote against it. I think it's a fair way to do it. But this motion proposes that the share that would be coming from Hanover and West Grey, and I won't speak for West Grey, but from Hanover, is already now given to the snowbirds, and that just wasn't the case at the time we discussed it.
Okay, those are fair comments. I guess the only rebuttal I can give is that any council, whether it's county council or your lower tier, make the decisions based on the information they have before them. You made your decisions based on the information you had at that time. This certainly has evolved through numerous meetings from that, and there's additional information obviously that came forward. So I guess it's always a lesson to all of us to make, whenever we make our decisions, if there's other information comes along, it certainly can change things, but this is the position we're in as of today. So any further discussion then on the motion presented before us? Councillor Wright.
Thank you very much, Warden, and I believe you just said what I believe. This council made a decision a number of meetings ago not to spend any money on the 150th, but to let each municipality do their own thing. And then we did break that by giving $4,000 to an airport. A motion I did not support, and I do not support this. I don't believe we collect tax dollars to give money away, but give tax dollars to operate the needs of the community that are vital, such as health, education, roads, etc., etc. So I don't think this is our role because we voted not to do this before, and I won't support this motion.
Okay, other comments before we call the vote? Councillor McQueen?
Well, we are here today because of what has happened in the past. Certainly, it was brought up at last October's corporate service meeting about moving forward with supporting Canada 150, and it was, you're right, Councillor Wright, it was decided that we weren't going to do that as a county. Then we had the request for the Snowhawks or Snowbirds to come, and that's a one-off. And this is the problem we run into sometimes when we receive requests for the one-offs. But we as a county council collectively agreed that we would support these snowbirds coming to the airport outside of Hanover. Then we had a request from Georgian Bluffs for also a similar request for that airport. But then it started to open and the ball of yarn started to roll down the field, and here we are today, because then it comes back to equity and about to be fair. So I think this motion is speaking to the fairness of the 9 municipalities that do sit around this table. And to be fair, it's suggesting that $2,000 is to be allocated to the 9 municipalities, whether it's been spent or not been spent. But I think we have to go back to the part is when we deal with one-offs, and then we have subsequent requests, which we did receive at our last committee of the whole, this is where this motion has been derived from in the sense of fairness. If the snowbirds had been the one-off, we probably would have been satisfied with that. But we have further requests. And there could still be more requests could come individually come from each municipality. So how do we deal with individual requests? Do we say, okay, one-off, we allow this, but we're not going to allow any more? Because we have on our motion or on our agenda the request that is now from Wyerton Airport with regard to Georgian Bluffs is second on this agenda. So we're going to deal with that, and we're going to support that one-off, but not support the other municipalities. So here we are. Are we to be fair to all the 9 municipalities, or do we not request or not receive any more one-offs? Because we did. We did the one-off. So here we are, and it's about fairness, Mr. Warden.
Okay, any further comments? Councillor Boddy.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just one quick one. As I recall, the original Saugeen Municipal Airport was that Grey County was going to get recognition for the donation. I don't see this in this motion. I'm not asking for an amendment, but if it goes through, I would hope that all of us would point out that Grey County is provided. And it is in there?
Yeah.
I've missed it then. Sorry.
Acknowledge such support from
Good. Thank you. Sorry about that.
That's line in the fourth paragraph.
Councillor Fosbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I'm curious to know what the balance is and would be in the one-time reserve, because I understand that it is essentially for one-time situations. And further, I think that it might be beneficial if, when we're talking about taking from a reserve, if we know what the impact will be.
Okay, Mr. Whippler.
We were at the end of the 2016 year budget, we were projecting a balance of almost $1.6 million in that one-time funding reserve.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further information? Take it we're ready for the vote. Call the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any? 1, 2, 3, 4. So that motion is carried. Then the next motion was deferred from the committee meeting then in April, was brought forward by Councillor Burley. What would your wish be there, Councillor Burley?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I will respectfully concede and withdraw the motion.
Okay, so you're withdrawing that motion. Okay. Do we need a mover and seconder for that, Heather, or just when he's referring or retracting that one? Okay, so we go on to C. This is regarding the long-term care report that was deferred from April 13th till today. Can I have a mover to put this on the floor, please? Moved by Councillor Klumpus, second by Councillor Eccles. So this motion, then what we're looking to do through this is to defer this report then to the May 25th meeting with the additional information then that was requested coming up in a subsequent report today. Is that clear for County Council? Councillor McQueen?
Clarity, the report's on the agenda, but not the motion.
The motion that's before you is to take that report that we received and deferring that now to the May 25th meeting. The original motion deferred it till today's meeting.
Right.
So this is because there was a recommendation in there, so that's deferring that motion then to the May 25th meeting.
Okay. So to the May 25th council or May 25th committee of the whole?
Committee of the whole. Other comments? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Warden. Is there any chance the parking lot will be finished in 2 weeks?
You're the one of the closest ones to come. You thought you might have been here early. Councillor Fosbrook.
Just to clarify, Mr. Warden, you mentioned another report on the agenda. We're just deferring this report. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's
Thank you,
correct.
sir.
Just the report that we've already heard, we're just referring that report. Correct. Councillor Halliday.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Warden. This first report that came from certainly was prepared before any public defer this again, which obviously I would like to see a fulsome report based on perhaps some of the other information that we glean over the next week or so that we could decide on. But this, keep putting this report forward and deferring it, to me, doesn't make any sense. I'd like to see it withdrawn and rethink done based on the input from the community engagement, which this is not discussion. Is not reflected in this particular.
Point of order. Point of order. The motion to defer is without discussion, is it not, sir? Mr. Warden? We're discussing the motion. The motion was to defer this. I believe it is without discussion.
You can,
Discussing
Sharon,
whether
would you?
wish to defer it. Discussing whether you wish to defer it, so you may, not at one to table.
Okay.
Councillor Halliday's comments, the CAO would like to comment. Just keep nice and close. It's
Respectfully, the purpose of our discussions and deliberations today, I think, is meant to further inform people's understanding of both the feedback that was received during the public engagement sessions, as well as providing some additional information. I think once we've had an opportunity to have our discussions today, council may see their way clear to providing further direction to the Director of Long-Term Care and myself. But for right now, I believe it would be most appropriate to hear that information out before determining what our next steps are.
Thank you. I'm not sure whether Councillor Eccles, has basically said that I can't talk on the issue, but I strongly feel that the report should be withdrawn rather than deferred. So anyhow, I don't know.
the motion that's before you is dealing strictly with the deferral. Nothing to do with what's in the report. It's just the deferral of the report. Councillor Halliday?
All due respect, I could ask for an amendment to have the report withdrawn.
Clerk is advising that would not be an amendment, that would be a separate motion.
Well, okay, thanks. Sometimes you lose on protocol, but the battle's just begun. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion before you is to defer this report to May the 25th meeting, knowing that there is an additional report on today's agenda for discussion. Ready for the vote? Call the vote. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That's carried. So this then, that is report 5617 is deferred to the May 25th meeting. So next we have then items for separate discussion. Before we look for a motion for that, we need to advise that the the report CW 18-17, transfer of ownership, Grey Road 12, has been resolved through further investigation within county staff. That process has already been completed, so that will not then need to be addressed today by County Council. For a mover then, or sorry, looking, is there any items then within the consent agenda that anyone would like to see pulled? Or are we comfortable moving that forward as presented? Councillor Fosbrook?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would like the opportunity to briefly discuss item TRCW 1717, survey equipment purchase single source.
You would like that one pulled?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other items? Okay, so then we have a motion then to, could I have a mover for the next motion then to accept the rest of the consent then? Moved by Councillor Bell, second by Councillor Body. Any further discussion then regarding that matter on consent agenda? I'll call the vote then. All in favor? That's carried. Now we move down to items for discussion and direction. First one is the task force to be created for discussion purposes between the Town of Blue Mountains and ourselves. Everyone was sent information whether you wanted to put your name forward. We want to thank those that did put their names forward. Kim, do you want to speak to the process then of moving to elect the three from county purpose?
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. Two things. So this report is in follow-up to the Resolution 63-17, where staff were directed to work with the Town of Blue Mountains to develop a terms of reference for a task force comprised of elected officials and staff, both of Grey County and of the Town of Blue Mountains, the purpose of which to just examine the various issues. There's a draft terms of reference attached here. If anyone has any comments or questions, I would advise council that this terms of reference is draft. It's been shared with the Town of Blue Mountains. It will be on the first agenda of the task force when they meet in order to see if there are any additions or other desired changes to it. But if people have any other comments about it now, I will gratefully accept those. Second of all, since there were a number of you who put your names forward, we will be selecting the task force members via a ballot. I believe the warden will give each one of the folks who put their names forward an opportunity to speak, and then the clerk will take care of the voting part of the process. So, is there any comments on the terms of reference?
Okay, we need a motion to put this on the floor. I'd start with moved by Councillor McKean, second by Councillor Fosbrook. Councillor Fosbrook, you had a question?
Yes, I'm wondering if it's possible to separate those questions in that motion.
As in, following members appointed.
There's two distinct questions, is there not?
What's the issue then between?
So to clarify, what I interpret is that there's 2 points to this motion. So we have that the report be received for information, and then we accept the draft terms of reference, and then further we're going to appoint members. So can we separate those questions is my question. So we can...
Well, draft terms of reference will be dealt with by the new committee that is struck.
So I cannot move to separate the question.
Yeah. Oh, you can separate if you wish. Yeah. So you're doing an amendment then to this to ask for that to be separated then?
Perhaps the clerk can set me straight. My understanding is we can separate a question if we feel it's appropriate, and I'm just asking for the questions to be separate. Well, I'm looking at the report, And the recommendations, I believe, are the proposed resolutions. Is that correct? No, what I would like to do is point number 1, as noted as a recommendation in the report. Perhaps I should clarify. Page 1 of the report, recommendations, has points 1 and 2 numbered. Is that in fact what we are voting on? Okay. So the recommendations are in fact the resolutions. There's points 1 and 2, and I'm asking to separate, and we'll have a discussion and a vote on point 1, and a discussion and a vote on point 2.
Do I have a seconder? We need to do the wording first on there before you're going to, the above resolution. Councillor Fosbrook, does that wording here then satisfy you? The resolution be separated into 2 resolutions voted on individually?
Sure.
Okay. Do I have a seconder for this amendment? Councillor Ardell? What we're voting on then is whether we separate this out or keep it as one resolution moving forward. Clear on that? Ready for the vote? All in favor of the amendment? 1, 2, 3, 4. Those opposed? It's lost. So we're back to the original report 0817, and for selection then of county council representatives.
Just to be,
MCAO, yeah.
if I may, just to be clear, is further discussion or suggestion with regard to the terms of reference as drafted?
Sorry, Councillor Halliday?
Yes, there was some discussion, I think, from you that these terms of reference were created both by the Grey County staff and the Town of Blue Mountains staff. Is this true and factual, or is this a point of view coming just from Grey County? I'd like to know if Town of Blue Mountains participated and approved these terms of reference.
If I may, the discussion, the draft terms of reference were shared between the Blue Mountains CAO and myself. It was agreed that they were a starting spot and that they would need to come back to the task force once it was formed for further discussion. But the purpose of these terms of reference was to provide an outline so that people had a sense of what the general direction of the task force was in order to assist people in determining whether or not this was something that they were going to participate in.
Councillor Halliday?
Yeah, with no disrespect to the warden and his role that he plays important role he plays in our community and our county, by putting the warden on this committee with a vote sways the balance. It could be a 4-3 against 3, and we'll never get anywhere. If we have 3 on each side and the warden acts as chair without having a vote, I would think that somehow we could build consensus, and that's what today's politics are all about, is building consensus. I don't see that we could build consensus with the hammerhead or the elephant in the room having that it could be, if ganged up on Town of Blue Mountains. And I don't think that that's really what we wanted. So therefore, I would suggest that the warden chair the meeting, but that he doesn't have a vote.
Kim, go ahead.
If I may, Normally, in a committee situation, you want to have an uneven number of participants in order to resolve a situation where there would be a tie vote. I'm sorry? Further, I think it's important to understand that the recommendations that come forward out of this task force will be coming back to Grey County Council. And I think it's really fundamental to the discussion and to the success of this endeavor that there's really good support for the recommendations that come out of the task force, so that when they come back to Grey County Council, people feel that they have been fully discussed and that there's, solid support for them coming forward. I think by virtue of agreeing to create the task force in the first place, that Grey County Council is signaling their willingness to work with the town of the Blue Mountains and to take this situation seriously and give it some solid consideration and put some effort in to making progress. So I'm very sorry that you're not feeling that that is in fact the case, because that certainly is not the intent from my perspective.
Well, I understand your point of view, but you also have to understand my point of view is that we determined that if we want this task force to be a true, unbiased, and consensus-building organization, it will come back to with recommendations that have gone through the consensus-building process as opposed to the political process of this side against that side. I think that the town of Blue Mountains asked for us to going to an unbiased adjudicator at the province, and we said no, and that that vote was lost. And then between the opposing sides, Councillor Eccles and myself, came up with a recommendation for a task force. And so that was what I call the spirit of consensus, working together. And so I'm just saying is I want to move that consensus building aspect forward. And that's why I'm suggesting that it become a consensus building task force as opposed to a political driven one with votes.
Councillor Ardell?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I guess I'm trained to stand up, and I have done for a long time. I agree with Councillor Halliday. Our task force would like to, well, we wanted to see a facilitator in the very beginning. We just wanted to facilitate dialogue as to how we could move this discussion forward. Now, our task force, we have 3 members. We wanted 3 members, and then I believe you wanted yourself to be on there. So what we were looking for was to have dialogue again. So with having 4 members from Grey County and only 3 members from the town of the Blue Mountains, we feel we're still not going to be getting anywhere because we feel it's going to be voted against again. So what we are looking for is to have dialogue and not to have, I understand how the voting works, I've been doing this for a very long time, that we have, if you wanted to have 3 councillors and yourself, that you would be non-voting, and that we could get some dialogue, and so we can have some discussions. And that's, why we wanted a facilitator. We wanted the adjudicator from the province of Ontario to hear our concerns of where we're going.
Councillor Ardell, you're getting off on the tangent on that. That discussion is over with.
It is over with.
Let's deal with.
This is with the task force. So now we're devising a task force that is going to have a 4-3 vote, and I just feel that it's not going to be fair. Our task force would just like to sit down with 3 and 3.
The task force has no authority for anything. The task force will bring back a recommendation to county council. So there's no, no matter what the composition is, it's still going to have to come back here. If it was to a case where it was a 4-3 vote on anything, there's no compromise on anything, and that's not the intent. That's not the intent of the task force. The task force is to look at all options of it. So, respectfully, we're all elected officials that are going to be on that to bring issues forward for discussion. I fail to see what the composition difference makes on it.
Well, I do see there is a difference, and I would just like to see, have, like a task force, have dialogue, and then it does have to go to this round table and the horseshoe, and have some dialogue from the rest of us again to move it completely forward, but I just feel that it's, we're not going to be getting anywhere.
Councillor McKean?
Thank you. I've been giving this some thought, and I see there's fair angst in this, and I'm wondering if possibly, if it is the warden and 3 members of county council and 3 members of the town of Blue Mountain, that maybe to get past this would be just to have a recorded vote on all the issues, because if that comes to county council, you'll be able to see if there was that divide. So right off the start, whenever there's a vote, it's a recorded vote.
At the task force?
At the task force. That will, that'll come back to county council, and if there is that clear divide, we'll be able to see it.
Councillor Fosbrook?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would just like to clarify a point, if I may. Bottom of page 1, the formal meetings will be a combination of small group discussions. Is this in fact going to be open meetings, published agendas, published minutes? And what is the definition of a small group discussion in the context of hammering out task force?
Kim, do you want that?
Certainly, these will be meetings that will be publicly advertised and open to public discussion unless there was...
Stay really close to it, Kim.
It's on the edge of my seat. These will be public meetings, open meetings, unless there is at some point a topic for conversation that would somehow allow us to go into closed session, or people felt it was necessary to go into closed session. But I'm assuming that would be the exception rather than the rule.
Follow-up?
And what is the definition of small group discussions? I just don't understand why that wording is in there.
I think that what we were trying to emphasize here was the slightly less formal way forward for the task force discussions, rather than there being the format that we enjoy here with a staff report and a motion or resolution put before the task force. It may be that we take a slightly different tact with this. It will be again at the discretion of the task force members, but I'm assuming that any member of the task force might be wanting to put in an initiative, an idea for discussion on the floor, or put an item on the agenda, and that people would just be able to talk about it rather than using the more formal report format at all times.
I thank you for that.
Okay. Councillor Boddy?
I may be talking a little bit early, but this is an issue that needs to be resolved. It's not going away. It hasn't gone away. It isn't something that we can vote with a 4-3 vote. I understand the argument to a certain extent. I think it's important that the warden be there. So why don't we add a 4th person from Collingwood? Excuse me. Did it
Township,
again?
Collingwood Township, Collingwood Township.
The town of Blue Mountains. Probably goes back to Collingwood Township, frankly. So why don't we get a 4th person added from the town of Blue and get someone from the clerk's department to chair it, whether it be Ms. Vokes or somebody like that. We need to have the discussion. A 4-4 vote, a 3-3 vote with or without a chair voting doesn't pass anyway, because you need to have a majority. But this is trying to resolve an issue, not necessarily come to a decision, if that makes sense. Set up an equal committee. Set up someone to chair it that is unbiased, unconnected to any position. Take turns between clerks between Blue Mountains and Grey County or something. There's got to be a way we can do this.
I would take it that that's part of the discussion at the first meeting with that. What's being presented here is, as we've discussed, 3 and 3, with the warden being the chair. Councillor Burley?
You know, I sit here around this round table, and we're trying to form a task force to deal with an issue that's been around the county for a long time. We can't agree on how to set up a task force, so really, great start, guys. I can't understand. I agree with what Councilman McKean's saying. Make it simple. Make all votes recorded. Leave the composition of the task force as put forward by the CAO. Let the task force meet, and then if the task force feels that we need to change the terms of reference or the structure and so on, let that task force do it. The whole gist of this conversation we're trying to have is trying to deal with concerns and issues that Blue Mountain has with Grey County and Grey County with Blue Mountains. So let's sit down and talk about it. Instead of wasting our time trying to form a task force, we could be here all day. Like, come on, guys.
Sorry, Councillor Greenfield?
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I may be naive in thinking this, but I would hope the members of this task force, both from the town of the Blue and Grey County, would go into this discussion completely, perhaps not neutral, but at least open-minded, and keep directed that what we're going to discuss and eventually decide is for both the benefit of the Blue Mountains and Grey County. And I don't see this Grey County versus Blue Mountains. I mean, if we're going in with that attitude, there's no use even starting this. Let's go in open-minded. Let's go in with the idea that we're going to eventually try to be beneficial for everyone involved. So getting back to the warden being involved, I don't have a problem with that. Let's just move forward, have an open mind and an open discussion.
Okay, we've had 7 candidates put their name forward. We're going to go in alphabetical order. Would just ask for a brief reason why each candidate thinks that they should be the chosen one then of the 3, if that's what we're agreeable that we're having the 3.
Just point of order, Mr. Warden.
Councillor
Should we
McQueen?
not vote on the resolution first before we pick the members? Because the terms of reference is on the floor, and if that is approved, then we'll pick the members. Is that not process?
Yes.
It's one resolution to do the to pick the
Oh.
councillors prior to this.
Okay, I thought both parts were part of the terms of reference, naming where the 3 members are coming from. If this motion was passed, then you would pick the members. I thought that would be your process.
The intent of the clerk's department. So, Councillor Boddy, in alphabetical order, you're the first candidate. Can you give us a brief explanation why you think you should be a member of the task force?
Mr. Warden, I've probably already just stated some of it, but this is an issue that's gone on with previous councils and previous townships. It is something that hasn't been resolved. We've talked about strategic plans and had the meeting out at Walters Falls to talk about some of the issues. Previous council looked at transportation issues. This is going to give us, this is the issue. We tried to solve this issue, or council and previous councils tried to solve this issue by nibbling away in the corners, but really what we need to do is focus the lens on this issue and then use this lens to look at some of those other things. Being newer on council, I'm hoping they can bring a fresh idea perhaps from what some of the councillors, no disrespect, that have been here for longer. I see it as an important issue. We can't deal with other issues going forward without dealing with this one first, and I would really like to be involved.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Burley is next.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I think I'm an ideal person to take part in this conversation, which I would look forward to. It's something we do need to resolve. With my business background and so on, dealing with issues, the Blue Mountains representative come here and gave us a brief outline of what the issues might be and so on. I really think I'm a person that can sit down and listen to both sides and hopefully come up with a good solution for both Blue Mountains and Grey County.
Thank you. Councillor Eccles, the next on the alphabetical order.
Thank you, and I'll follow your direction. Stay seated so that I can be heard, but I've never had that discussion before that my voice wasn't loud enough. Look forward to the support from fellow councillors to sit on this board or this task force for the simple reason that not only have I been warden 3 times and bring a lot of experience in discussions with Blue Mountains previous, but also being chair of corporate services, because I think the biggest point of this is dealing with the tax and how the proportion from Blue Mountains is used within the county, and having a good working relationship or understanding of the corporate services and the tax part of it. I think it would be very beneficial going forward to this. And my councillor associate, Mr. Boddy, I think we do need some background experience as well on this to bring some of the history forward from the county's perspective as well too. So thank you, and I look forward to your support on helping the county resolve some of the issues between the 2 municipalities.
Okay, thank you. Next is Councillor Fosbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. I would say briefly that as a newer member of this group, I believe that the perspective that I would bring might be refreshing. And certainly my focus is to hopefully have a better understanding of not only the communications that might have been better in the past, but more importantly, how we can improve those communications in the future. I look forward to the opportunity to participate in open discussions that demonstrate that where we do communicate effectively, that perhaps we might not have needed this task force in the first place, sir.
Okay, thank you. Next is Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Grey County was established in 1852. That's 165 years ago. I don't think anybody in this room today considers that Grey County of that era necessarily fits in the world of 2017. I've been a neighbor to Blue Mountains all my life. Have quite a bit of down-home knowledge about the Blue, and I'm not just talking about the village of Blue, I'm talking about the entire municipality. I think this task force could very well be the first step in the reshaping of Grey County, whether it could mean Blue Mountains leaving us, whether it could mean Grey County being a single tier, that waits to be seen. But this is a very, very important initiative in the future of this county, and I'd like to be there right from the start as a part of the conversation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Halliday.
Thank you very much. I'm a new kid on the block at this county council, and I've certainly enjoyed the information that I received and the rapport between our councils. Everybody has spoken quite nicely and has a lot of good points. I think, but in the spirit of what I consider consensus building, Councillor Eccles and I, who were opposite sides on the last vote on it, came together and said we would create a task force to explore the equitability of some of the issues. So I do believe that I'm a consensus builder. I spent 38 years in business with many union negotiations, and I have to say that everything was in good shape after I left it. So I'm an experienced negotiator. I have a good idea about how solutions can be looked at. I've explored algorithms for solutions, and I do have some solutions that I could offer. So I look forward to your support as a passionate person who wants to see justice and a fulsome discussion going forward.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Hicks.
say that I'm new on the block as well at this table, and so I have no history. I know that this issue has been around a real long time. At the last meeting, you heard me stand up and I spoke, I think, very honestly and eloquently to say, I think this is a family dispute, and I think it requires people to come in to that negotiation with no agenda. I have no agenda. I have no history. I'm not sure I fully understand the history of this issue. So I think that's a strength that I would bring to this body, that I have no baggage. I have some experience in training as a lawyer and as a social worker. I have training and experience with negotiation. I have training and experience with alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, and I've completed the Harvard negotiation training program. So those are some practical things I think I will bring to this committee. I'll bring, I think, a sensitivity to not just the issues, the content, but to the process, because I think the process of how we get through this is going to be equally as important as the issues that we address. So I'm looking forward to bringing that experience. Anyways, that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the process, and everyone will receive a ballot. You can put up to 3 names. If anybody puts more than 3 names on it, then obviously that ballot is discarded. Past practice has been usually we're the CAO, the clerk, and the warden then are the scrutineers and count the ballots. Everyone okay with that process continuing still? Thank you.
We vote by mail?
Grant, how tidy is your office? Can we use it?
Norman.
And Councillor Hicks.
Again?
Body, Eccles, and Hicks.
And back to the motion, then, to endorse the report, and now that we have the elected officials then chosen by ballot. Any further discussion then on the motion? Call the vote, then all in favor? Opposed, if any? And that's carried. So next then we go to CW 07-17 report, the long-term care review. Lynn. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you, Mr. Warden.
Just ask you that you keep very close to the mic if you would, please, just so that everyone can hear as well as the other room. Thanks, Lynn.
Okay. Good morning. This report that you have in your package and this presentation is a summary of the feedback that was received. It addresses some outstanding questions and ideas that kept coming forward, and it also clarifies some implications with remaining status quo. There's been a dedicated web page since last July for long-term care redevelopment, and we've kept that up to date as we've went along, putting on different things. We've had 900 unique views, and the average time spent on the web page is about 5 minutes, and visits peaked at 137 views on March the 20th. You can see here we had 2 public information sessions, one on March 30th, one March 31st, and we've gathered feedback from comments cards, people speaking at meetings, voicemail, a dedicated email, letters, and I put a chart in there of the feedback we've received. From comment cards left at meetings and around in the public, 25 comments. Speaking at meetings, we've had more than 75 people. Voice messages, 4. Emails and letters, 16. We continue to have them come in and tabulate them, address them, etc. So of the 123 comments we heard, there were some common themes which I'm going to go over with you. Status quo. Most people making comments at the public sessions were in favor of maintaining status quo. They wanted the 3 homes in their current size, in their current community, and this was specifically mentioned 31 times in the tract feedback. The geographical distance between Markdale and Durham was another concern. 17 people specifically raised comments about the distance between Markdale and Durham. Commenters were concerned about the additional time spent driving, issues with winter and night driving, and also about the challenge for having to travel further to visit family and friends. There was an opposition to privatization, and the perception of privatization in general was a theme. In total, we received 10 direct comments in opposition of a management company to oversee the 3 long-term care homes or opposing the sale of Grey Gables to a private operator to run as assisted living. Staff do not perceive these recommendations as privatization. The staff in the homes would remain Grey County employees, and the management company would simply assist the homes in meeting compliance and the council in meeting their obligations under the Long-Term Care Homes Act. Grey County will continue to operate long-term care, and the sale of the current Grey Gables building to a private assisted living operator is meant to attract additional services into the area. There was some people that wanted a social and economic impact study, and a small number of comments have been raised about that need, and we believe that the CBRE report will share some information and enlightenment on that. There was uncertainty for tenants who have operations in the 2 homes, Rockwood Terrace and Grey Gables, and it is expected that a potential purchaser will want to retain the current tenants. We heard about LHIN boundaries, service planning, and the availability of beds. Grey County is serviced by 3 different LHINs. The majority of Grey County is in the Southwest LHIN. However, there's portions of Southgate, West Grey, Grey Highlands, and the town of Blue Mountains that reside within the boundaries of Waterloo, Wellington, and the North Simcoe, Muskoka LHIN. For the purpose of determining long-term care service availability, the Southwest LHIN confirmed that they took into account the population within the prescribed radius of the home, even though that radius might cross a boundary. For the municipalities with residents who reside in another LHIN, the population base in that portion of their municipality is reflected in the data of those respective LHINs, and that's where they use those numbers to plan for health system services and the funding for that population. Okay, so just to reiterate that the LHIN's boundary, the radius they looked at, is the whole area. However, the Ministry for Funding and Service Planning, they tend to adjust the boundaries a little bit. And finally, we heard a lot of great feedback about the homes, the cares, and the services that we do provide in our homes. And there have been significant changes in long-term care sector in the past decade. There's been the Long-Term Care Homes Act, Aging at Home initiatives. There's a focus on reducing the alternative level of care beds in the hospitals, and people who go into hospital are being discharged earlier than they ever were in the past. This has all contributed to a much higher acuity level for residents living in long-term care. then results in increased specialization required in our home to care for those residents. Long-term care homes have had to change and will continue to change as residents' needs change. The average age of a person living in Grey County home is 85 years, and 86% of the residents are 75 years of age and older. Because people are staying in their own homes or in retirement communities longer, and they're not moving into long-term care, the same condition as they used to in the past, the length of stay in long-term care has decreased dramatically. And I've put a chart up there that is our data from 2010 to current, and you can see the decline in the length of stay. The average person stays in a long-term care home. And this is really indicative of the level of care and the medical conditions and acuity of the residents who live with us. The dark line, the provincial average, is 2 years, and we are rapidly approaching that level. One of the things we do know that long-term care placement is governed by the Community Care Access Center, and people choose or can choose up to 5 homes to live in. And I really tried to understand, where do people come from that live in our homes? So the first thing that was reviewed was the list of who the first or emergency contact is for the residents in the homes. At Lee Manor, 41% of the residents had a contact in Owen Sound. At Grey Gables and Rockwood Terrace, it's 29 and 24% have a contact with the same mailing address as the home they live in. I looked a little deeper and tried to figure out what drives where people live. Some people continue to live in their home communities, that's a fact. Other times they move into a home because it's the first available bed. Some locations are chosen so the person could be closer to family and friends, and we see people moving into the area, moving out of the area for that very reason. Simply, I found a lot of people chose a home because they liked the home. This seems to be the case, and I back that up with the fact that our new long-term care homes, newer homes, all have the longest wait lists. The homes with the shortest wait lists are the older homes. And this will be resolved as all the homes in Ontario need to be redeveloped. So some people have expressed concerns about a larger home being more institutional than a small home. Long-term care homes are evolving into chronic care hospitals. We have residents with advanced wounds, PICC lines, catheters, or not catheters, central catheters, IVs, all sorts of things. And we are expecting mechanical ventilation in the future. That means we have to have highly trained, qualified staff and equipment and supplies to meet that demand. Staff in a larger home have more opportunity to use these specialized skills, and a smaller home will have less opportunity to use some of the specialized equipment, and the cost for this equipment has to be spread over a smaller budget. The provision of this level of care is also impacted by the number of residents we see coming into the home with responsive behaviors. So when I talk about complex care, you will have somebody with an advanced dementia living in the same environment as somebody with acute medical needs. And that is a real challenge for all Ontario long-term care homes. So the 3 things that I want to look at or direct your attention to when we talk about bigger versus smaller is the legislative requirements. Legislative requirements require that all homes in the province of Ontario perform and provide a set standard of care. There are mandatory programs and services which we all must comply with. Design standards are set to allow operators to operate efficiently while maintaining a nice quality, good quality of life for our residents. 32 residents in a home area, dedicated personal space, bathing, dining room, and social space is the standard and requirement for all long-term care homes in Ontario. Inconsistency of care providers. There is the same requirement and need to provide consistent care for our residents. It is where they live. It's people that are providing the most personal care to a resident, and it doesn't matter whether you're a large home or a small home. Residents deserve and need the same care. And we expect that the resident quality of life and satisfaction to be the same regardless of the size of home. And this table that I've got before you here is an indicator over the past 4 years where we added to our annual resident survey a question: would you recommend this home to others? And you can see by this chart the quality improvement initiatives that we put in a couple years ago have had great effect in the home, and all homes have a high standard and high response to the recommendation of the home they live in. Upcoming retirements. Well, I spoke about that in the past, and we have a lot. 69 full-time and 13 part-time retirements coming up over the next 5 to 6 years. It started off at 6. We're down to about 5.5 years now. And over the last month, I've received notice of 4 more retirements. It's not in one of the affected homes. It's actually at Lee Manor. All homes are seeing a huge increase in the number of retirements. We did recruit over 90 employees in 2016, and this isn't just a Grey County issue. It's provincial. It's throughout Grey County, not just our homes, I mean. It is provincial, and it is national. In fact, I read an article this week of a new home that was built in Northern Ontario that has been unable to open the whole home because they cannot staff it at this point. So we've got vacant beds sitting, waiting for staff. This is only going to continue to escalate. We have experienced more recruitment challenges at Grey Gables than the other 2 homes, and recently an agency contract was expanded to include the provision of personal support workers in the home, and that does not meet our compliance requirements. That is a risk. Despite Grey County having a large number of staff, the staffing complement is specific for each home, meaning staff cannot work between the homes. This results in many part-time employees working for multiple employers. It is difficult to guarantee and maintain a strong base of loyal part-time employees when they don't have a good amount of part-time shifts to work at. The goal of amalgamation is to improve the ability to provide more full-time opportunities and create more stable part-time positions in order to assist our labor pool. So does travel time impact employment? You've seen this picture that's in this slide before and is in the report. And we do know that staff come from a large geographical area. A review of the staff mailing address information identified that each of the homes have a broad cross-section of staff who travel regularly for work. Many employees leave one community where there is a home and travel to another community where they work. And when we look at Grey County employees, and I'm not just talking the home, Grey County in general, we find that staff do travel for work. Does home size impact staffing? Small homes typically have fewer direct care hours than large homes. That is a provincial fact. Growing administrative requirements have a bigger impact on small homes. And the increased acuity increases the need for higher levels of direct care staff. And that has a real future implication. I think you could talk to any of the staff in any of the homes and they would all say more staff to meet the needs of the resident is a top priority. The difference in staffing levels on this chart is directly attributed to the case mix index, which is the provincial way of identifying acuity and distributing funding. It's also set or based on the legislative requirement for some positions and the number of beds in the home in which the costs can be shared across. So the CMI at Grey Gables has historically been the lowest, and this really does impact. It doesn't mean that their care isn't heavier than what their staffing level is. It just means that those resources have to be shared over a greater footprint in the home. A person might think that administrative resources should be less in a smaller home. The problem is many functions require the same amount of work, even if you have a big home. The regulations are the same. Service agreements and requirements under the Act are the same for a small home as they are for the large home. Time frames for mandatory programs, evaluation of programs and services, auditing, quality improvement plans, development, implementation of staff education, fire drills. It all takes the same amount of time regardless of the size of the home you're working in. The big challenge in a small home is that often some of the team members are part-time, so you really have fewer members to spread these jobs out across. The county must continue to provide funding in addition to the province to support daily operations in the 3 county homes. Now this slide demonstrates the cost per bed for each home based on the daily operating costs. It does not include capital. Higher acuity often means a higher cost for care-related supplies and equipment. The ministry has given us some one-time funding for equipment. The problem is, we get the equipment, we're responsible to maintain it, and we're responsible to replace it when the time comes. So it's kind of that hidden surprise you. You know, here's a gift, 6 years from now, you've got to replace it. So that has been a big impact for the homes as well. So you can see here the average cost of a bed at small home, Grey Gables, is $16,224, and that is the tax levy to support a bed in the home, a small home, versus in a larger home, it's about $11,400. Smaller home also has to absorb many set fees and costs across a smaller budget. I've talked about that a bit. Other things are the bathing equipment, number of baths, dietary equipment, lifting equipment, legal costs. You know, if there's an arbitration, a lawyer's bill, it's so much an hour, it's so much a session. They don't look at it and say, well, you've got half the budget of a big home, so we'll give you half the bill. Those are real impacts and challenges in a small home. This slide shows the total operating requirements for the 3 homes, and it's a look back. You'll see that the first bar there is 2007, where the total operating costs were almost $19,000, $18,852,000. In 2017, that has climbed to $27 million, and if we follow on that same trajectory, it will be close to $39 million by 2027. The operating budget for the 3 county long-term care homes has increased more than 43%, or an average of more than 4% annually over the past 10 years. In the same period, the Consumer Price Index has increased an average of 2.1% annually. Assuming the status quo, this is where we can expect to be. This one is the annual levy contribution per bed. It averages the 3 homes, and it includes capital and operating costs. So we've done the same thing here. We're supported by municipal costs, and that is expected to continue. The municipal portion of the operating and capital costs per bed has increased nearly 64% in the period of 2007 to 2017. If this trend continues and nothing is done to restructure the cost base, the annual cost to fund this project or this portfolio will be nearly $32,000 per bed by 2027. Ministry funding has not kept up with the escalating costs. Hydro, insurance, wages, benefits, the increasing complexities we're seeing in the home. We received some funding a few years ago, and they changed the basis that we receive funding for complex care. Instead of receiving the money on a per-case basis, we now receive, I think it's 63 cents as part of our base funding. In a small home, one resident with high needs uses that whole amount up in a very short manner. It was identified, both at the public meetings and a couple other places, the option of providing assisted living or retirement as part of what we offer, and maybe that might help offset and meet needs in the communities. And there's some challenges with that. Retirement homes have a different legislation, and we would be working within a different spectrum if we decided to move that direction. It does not address the challenge of a small long-term care home in Ontario to deliver the cost. Staff can't work in both operations. It does not address our staffing issues. In some ways, it would actually widen the gap. Menus, meal preparation, that type of thing is separate. You can't just make a pot of soup and serve it to everyone. You have to separate out the food costs, the staffing costs associated with both operations. That is adding a new service to Grey County, and if that is the desire of council, we can explore it further. However, I would really caution that it is adding a new service that we're not currently providing when we already have challenges and have to make decisions about redevelopment. This slide illustrates, similar to the previous couple slides, that the municipal contribution by each individual municipality for long-term care. And we broke out the large county budget to what the contribution would be by municipality. The province, I said, have not kept pace with the demands and needs for expenses to manage in this increasingly complex environment, and funding to offset the deficit has an increasing financial impact on the property tax base over the past 10 years, and it will have more going forward into the next 10 years. So there's been considerable discussion regarding the most appropriate way to structure and restructure possibly long-term care services to meet the current and future needs of the citizens of Grey County. We've heard people refer to the status quo and prefer it. However, maintaining the status quo option for 3 homes has a challenge, which I believe I presented to you today. Some considerations for council is that long-term care has changed and will continue to change. It's not something that we can look at and say, there we are, let's flatline it and keep things status quo. This is about we have to be able to change to meet those demands. It's required under legislation. The legislation says we will have a home and we need to be able to manage it. We have to consider the increased pressure provincially for tax dollars. And, we do our part. We're lobbying. We're telling the ministry we need more money. But if you watch the budget announcements, education, healthcare, 2 big areas where funding's needed, and there will be increased financial pressures for those areas. We need to be able to deliver the high-quality care that the residents need. We need to be able to have staff that are highly trained, specialized, ready to look after residents. We need equipment in the homes, and that's not going to change. The final thing is the recruitment and retention of a stable workforce. And with the baby boomers retiring, that is continuing to be a challenge for homes, for every industry, I believe, and it will continue until we get it sorted out. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Just to go back to the start of the presentation, was there a motion then to put, okay, but I don't think I had a mover and second to do that, and I apologize. So could I have a move by Councillor Pringle and a seconder for this, Councillor Klumpus? My apologies for not having that as a preamble to start with, but it was really to receive this report. So we've had the report. Questions now from County Council to what Lynn has presented here before we go to any subsequent reports regarding this matter. Councillor McQueen?
Mr. Warden, I feel I can speak better standing up.
They can't hear you in the other room, so you need to make sure you're really close to the mic then.
All right, I'll speak good and loud. Does everybody hear me now? Good. Just regards to the budget part, Lynn, I know in the past, this previous budget that was came out, that there was some money in for long-term care, as I understand, 2% increase along with 6% for the food allowance increases. Have we seen those regular increases in every budget per year? Is that reflected in your numbers of that allocation of next year?
Last year was the first year, I believe it was last year, yes, that we received a notice of multi-year funding from the ministry, and that commitment was 3 years at 2% each year for nursing and personal care. So that supports wages and benefits within the nursing envelope only. The funding increase we received this year for food, every year we get a little bit. This is a nicer increase this year, but it's not something that happens every year, no. We're still waiting to hear what increase we might receive for this year related to other accommodations, which is housekeeping, laundry, maintenance, and office. So we've got nothing for 2016 yet, or 17.
6% is certainly a nice thing to see for the food allowance.
It is a very nice thing to see, but it is definitely not the norm.
So the trends that you were showing here for Grey County, is that reflective throughout the province as far as other counties that are dealing with the same increases? Is this unique to Grey County, or is this something that, because we're running into the aging baby boomers that are coming along, you mentioned about the length of stay is decreasing, but they probably need more care when they get there. And so because and we all know that hospitals are shortening the number of beds, the length of stay in there, so when our homes or other homes that are county-owned or long-term cares that are private beds are receiving patients that are much more in need.
Yes, that is the lay of the land now. All long-term care homes are caring for the same residents. We're all experiencing the same change in residents, and that is standard across the province. As far as what each municipality contributes to long-term care, that is their decision. Some municipalities have 1 home, 2 homes, 3 homes, whatever their is. They meet the legislation, and I would say across and listening at different service tables, all municipalities are struggling with the delivery of long-term care service and the escalating costs. It is not.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Mr. Warden, along the same line, is the Ministry of Health and Long-Term Care aware of this end result? The line that really caught me, you said long-term care homes are evolving into chronic care hospitals. We're all aware of the earlier discharges from hospitals. Families, CCAC, are now caring for family members. They're coming into the long-term care homes with more acute needs, medical needs. So is the Ministry of Health aware of this? Their strategy is creating this problem at the other end. And maybe you can't give me a definitive answer, but you may have an indication. And is it something we need to have a delegation at AMO and start voicing our concerns about this?
Okay. And the ministry is routinely part of discussions from both ONUS, which is a nonprofit group for seniors in housing, as well as the Ontario Long-Term Care Association. So they do make annual budget presentations to the ministry, as well as meet with them several times through the year and sit on many provincial committees to talk about the impact of one small change and the entire outcome for the residents and homes.
I would just add to Lynn's point in response to your question, Councillor Patterson. Something that we've seen recently was an announcement where the hospital, I think, was it closer to Toronto, providing vouchers for ALC patients to have them placed into a retirement assisted living facility, so the voucher would cover their costs for being there, just as a strategy to free up the beds in hospital.
Councillor Jack?
Okay, thank you for that. Also, I just have a few concerns here. We have the possibility here of roughly 1,000 homes moving into the Dundalk area. And I believe, and I'm not sure in the numbers for Grey Highlands, but I think it's about 100 that they have new homes coming in also. So, and I think that I think all these committees up here, even yourselves, need to try and get the government to come and sit down with you and talk about it. Because it just seems there are more people moving out of the city into the smaller, or into the rural areas, because they like the peace and quiet and the services. Also, and I think the long-term homes we have, that's great. We need to be able to keep those. And it's the same, I think, if you could ever get some of those people out of Queen's Park to come and talk to you and listen to them. Like it's the same when we're talking about the hospital. And here they're talking about a new hospital in Markdale, and lo and behold, we might have 2 beds in there. Now, what good are 2 beds? So I just think that that we need to see if we can't get somebody up here to meet with the committee of the county to try and blend some of this in together better. Thank you.
Thanks, Norm. Councillor Fosbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. So just to follow up on Councillor Jack's comment, I made a few observations in your report, and thank you very much, Lynn. And in particular on page 5, where you talk about at Lee Manor, 41% of the residents had a contact listed with an Owen Sound address. Grey Gables and Rockwood Terrace had 29% and 24% in their respective communities. Could you define what you used to establish those communities? Because, you know, Southgate is growing, Town of Blue Mountains is impacted. Could you elaborate?
I looked at the address of the person who is listed as emergency or first contact. If their address was Durham, they were counted. So I looked, you know, you're limited. I can't really identify where specifically they live in that address, but I looked for the specific community, same as for Markdale. If the first contact or family was listed, emergency contact was Markdale, that's what I counted to get that number.
And to that point, if you have residents at Grey Gables and equally in Durham, who are residents of Southgate or Grey Gables and Town of Blue Mountains, you're not really capturing all of the information that you're trying to quantify here. Am I missing something?
What I was trying to demonstrate with this is the fact that people come to the homes in the community from a wide variety of space, a large area, geographical area, and that at Grey Gables, 29% of the residents living in that home actually have an emergency or first contact from Markdale. The remaining residents would be from areas outside of Markdale.
Okay, and I guess I just want to make the point that when you define community, I think it's arguable that residents from Southgate would define this as part of their community because it's the closest thing they've got. It's all they've got. So, go ahead.
I believe there's a lot of discussion on that because people have a natural path or a natural direction they travel for services. If you live in Meaford, people might say, I go to Blue Mountains. Others might say, I go to Owen Sound for things. If you live in Dundalk, you may travel to Orangeville or Shelburne for certain items. So to try and break it down to a real finite number for something like this, it's next to impossible. And there were so many other impacting factors on why a person chose a home. We have people moving into our homes that it might be the second or third choice, but when their first choice comes up, they decide to stay where they are because they've settled in and that becomes their home. And a lot of people, and even at Owen Sound, Lee Manor only has 41% of their first or emergency contact people listed as living within Owen Sound proper. That means that there's 59% that travel from Georgian Bluffs, West Grey, Blue Mountains, wherever to visit. So that was where I was trying to make that demonstration that not all our residents have people living down the street coming in to visit them every day. We really count on people coming in from a distance, and people travel.
Well, I appreciate your elaborating on that. So the other point that I wanted to address was we've heard a lot about this CBRE report.
Yes.
And can you explain what we really should be anticipating seeing in it? Because it has not been published, has it not?
I believe that that did go out in your email, and it's next on the agenda, perhaps.
It's next on the agenda.
Okay. Well, then I apologize. I saw that we got an email, but I wasn't clear that this report was published for people to actually see. Am I mistaken? Okay. So the public haven't had the benefit of it yet? Right. Okay. I guess my last point would be that there's clearly significant financial implications to these decisions, and I just wonder if our Director of Finance has any comment on some of the numbers that we're looking at, because to Councillor McQueen's point, 64% increase from 2007 to 2017, I'm just not really clear where that is derived from.
Looking strictly at what we've budgeted for levy is what those comparisons are. And I know Lynn has highlighted in her report, the complexity of the patients in that have come in. So not all of these were just strictly cost of living increases that have occurred. We've had to add staff or more equipment, administrators, et cetera, to meet legislation and that. So it's not all just, I would say, cost of living. There has been other requirements due to the complexity of the clients, and that's why you're seeing your operating budgets going up as they are. And so it's, like I said, it's not just all, well, it's a cost of living wage increases to those staff. We've had to add staff and other items to ensure to meet all of the requirements of the legislation. So,
Thank you very much.
Okay, other comments regarding Lynn's report? Councillor Mackey.
Mr. Warden, and whether it's to Lynn or to our Director of Finance, the most popular, from the citizen that have attended, the public sessions was the status quo. I'm still not clear on what the actual levy adjustment would be if we went with the status quo, what the annualized contribution increase would be. I think that's something Council really needs to have a good handle on if we're making this decision, to know what the increase actually would be.
I think what we tried to demonstrate in those two slides in there is a status quo if you continue now. That doesn't incorporate a cost of building and that in it, but just showing operating costs if you continued with the status quo of the three homes. That's what I was trying to demonstrate in Lynn's report there, where the annual levy requirement would go.
Can you pull that up, Lynn, from there, if you would, please, that slide that Councillor Mackey's question is regards? Yeah, in your package, Councillor Mackey, there was that as well. This is, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ward. I certainly understand, based on the current trajectory, where we would end up. That pattern is going to go that way irregardless of the decision that's made. If we go with two, our costs are still going to keep going up, not to the same extent. So I'm guessing, I want to know what the difference is between, going with two homes as opposed to going with status quo. How does that look at the end of the day? I mean, that's what's missing here.
Okay.
Be able to make a decision between the two. How much does it cost if we need to go with two as opposed to three? Because I think it's, money well spent. We're talking numbers here. If you look at the cost to incarcerate, it's far less to keep a person in long-term care than what it is to incarcerate someone. So, it's priorities that we have to have in, both in Grey County and in the province. Where are we willing to spend the dollars? It's $110,000 a year to incarcerate someone, and I think we're spending about $90,000 total, to keep somebody in a quality long-term care bed. So it's part of the equation that we have to think about.
So, Mr. Warden, on page 9 of the report, I put in from the consultant's report it's a year old now, but they had estimated at that time a savings of $607,587,000 for the first year for staffing, nursing supplies, and equipment. That would be the initial savings. And we're not talking about reducing service. We're talking about trying to operate more efficiently in this, and this is maintaining our number of beds.
Keane.
Thank you, Warden Barfoot. I guess kind of similar to Councillor Mackey's queries as to the cost. You know, you take a look at the cost, that's why we're having this discussion, because these are huge numbers. Like, this is likely one of the bigger decisions that Grey County Council will make this term. But I look at those numbers, and the increases are something to behold. And with one slide there it showed with the Blue Mountain, it's almost like a arrow going through my heart, actually, when you saw that. But aside from that, this is only one part of the puzzle. Like, this is not the only increase Grey County is going to have. Like, we also have a deficit in our roads budget. Where we're going, our capital assets need to be increased. And I think it's the accumulative effect of this and that, and the EMS is going to be increasing. And I think it really needs to be, or the people around this table got to take a look at this and say, okay, what is the effect on taxation in Grey County going to be at the status quo of all of these if we don't take a real serious look? And maybe there isn't anything we can do with the costs. But we really need to take a look at what it's going to do to Grey County taxation, because nothing's going to empty out the countryside quicker than having your property taxes double in 10 years' time. And that's, I believe, where this is headed for. Thank you.
Okay. Other comments about the report? Councillor Halliday.
Thank you very much, Mr. Warden. Thank you, Lynn, for your information. It certainly provides me with some background that saves me digging through a lot of different reports to come up with answers. I duly note that I'm proud to be part of a county and a citizen of a county that cares about its seniors and cares about a lot of different things. And being on the plus side of 75 and in the statistics, I watch what's happening to the plus side of 75. And in 2011, there were 9,085 seniors 75 and plus in our community, and there are 786 beds throughout Grey County. That means in 2011 we had 86.5 beds per thousand on the 75 plus side. Now the Canada Census is out now, and it's an increase of 7%. So there's 9,755 seniors 75 plus. So that's a 7% growth over 5 years. The interesting statistics is that in the 65 to 74 category in 2011 versus the 65 to 74 category in 2016, there is a 26% increase. So we do have a tsunami of seniors coming down the road, all right? So we do have other issues to look at, and perhaps Grey County needs to start looking at advocating for more beds. It doesn't have to be private beds, but more beds for its county, because right now I see going forward to 2021, we're going to be into very bad shape on the beds per for that cohort of 75 plus. So that's an early warning sign that we should be doing something about it. I know our mayor and myself are going to be talking to Dr. Koskins, and I know the mayor will speak to that. Interesting, though, is the cost. I mean, that's $6.2 million. I just want you to know that the town of Blue Mountains, Owen Sound, and Grey Highlands provide 51% of the funding for that particular cost. I understand costs. I didn't run successful businesses without understanding costs. It's whether or not you consider the cost justified for the social equation that we want to provide to our citizens in Grey County. I think it's very important that's a consideration. Now, that being said, it's also the efficiency of how you manage that, those facilities. Now, we in Grey Highlands have asked and support the status quo, but that doesn't mean that we don't look at trying to achieve efficiencies within the status quo. And so we support looking at those. I think that I think we do have many things to consider here. And having studied probability and statistics when I was a lot younger, you can do a lot of different things with numbers. And I haven't had a chance yet I've given you a few numbers, but there's a lot of things that we need to address before we make any serious decisions going forward. And one is social justice, and that's important to me.
Okay, other comments regarding Lynn's report? Councillor Hicks?
Mr. Warden, I'm concerned about a number of things, but one of the concerns I have is the impact on staff. There was a slide in your deck that I don't think was included in our materials about where staff live. Could we get back to that? It moved a little quickly for me. Yeah, there we are. We'll be able to get this? It'll be available? Yeah, so I can go back to it.
It'll be in your package.
I didn't see it in I didn't see this particular slide in our...
Those particular numbers, I don't know whether I put them in the report. I'll have to check. But
Councillor Fosbrook.
Thank you, Mr. Warden. Just one more question, if I may. There seems to have been a lot of discussion about the challenge of staffing and understanding that whatever challenges we may have, others would logically have as well. I'm not clear on how restructuring and privatizing and altering is going to improve that challenge.
it's bringing the existing staff we have together under one umbrella. Right now, our staff are working part-time jobs, 2 or 3 employers, and so then when you call them for a shift, they're not available. Whereas we find in a larger home, often you can go out and the staff are already working for you. When you're trying to schedule to accommodate vacation and that type of thing, you have a larger pool to work with. Summertime, Christmas time, all that type of thing, the pool's there and they're dedicated to you. And when you're scheduling, you can adjust that schedule and, do some tweaks and actually cover shifts. Whereas if people don't have availability to work for you because they're working at their other job, your hands are tied.
So just...
Wait, sorry, same train of thought. Kim just wants to read that as well.
I think if I can refer you to the section in your report that speaks to becoming an employer of choice. In order for us to meet the challenges that we face currently, it's not enough, I don't think, to do a little bit better. We are going to have to do a whole lot better if we're going to maintain compliance and be able to fill these shifts and provide the optimum level of care that I think people expect from being in a Grey County home. This isn't, and it goes far beyond just filling shifts. It has to do with our ability to train people, to provide that ongoing training and development that people need to keep current in their skills, and to be able to backfill people in the homes while others are away on training. It's just, there's a critical mass of employees that I think allows you to be able to do that, and we're struggling with the size of that facility right now to be able to do that. These are just conversations that Lynn and I have had on an ongoing basis, and really what we're trying to do is determine how we can make this a better experience for our staff to work for Grey County so that they'll be able to commit to us and be available when we need them.
Thank you for that. So would it stand to reason that the Owen Sound facility doesn't have those same challenges by virtue of scale?
We have challenges because it's a national problem. The challenges are everywhere. At Lee Manor, they're able to adapt and fill shifts better.
Well, I just wanted to express that it's still a challenging question for me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got some other reports that are going to come up with this. Is there anything else then regarding this report here itself? Councillor McQueen?
Well, thank you, Mr. Warden. And I think it's reflective of a number of people that are today that on the first party report, Lynn, that talked about a number of people would prefer the status quo, distance, opposition to privatization, the social economic, tenants uncertainty, and goes on and on and on. I think Jack mentioned about the growth in that area, and it is coming. I mean, we just went through a NARC process with the local school board, and they didn't have anything on their radar with regards to what's happening in Southgate. You see changes everywhere you drive. You see sold signs. People are coming to our area. I think it's very important, and I think you brought this out, Lynn, that the bigger issue is not in Grey County. The bigger issue is the province. And I think that we need to maybe put this to the side, because I think it, as Councillor Mackey's brought it out and others, is even if we move 2 homes into 1, we still have problems. It's funding. It's the increasing cost that's going to be on our, with us with regards to the cost per bed. I would suggest that, and just one other thing, I understand that there is a petition out there right now that's close to over 1,400 names. I know that I had received confirmation or concern that there were a few individuals that were trying to schedule a delegation on today's agenda, but couldn't. But I also hear that there was a report that came out last night that's going to be talked about next. I know when a scheduled delegation comes forward, it needs 10 days to have that information on our agenda, but we get a report for the night before. So I think that maybe that report needs to be put off to the 25th. But in summary, Mr. Warden, I think we need to look at the bigger problem. I attended a community hub summit last week in Toronto, and I sat in a session with Minister Hoskins was there, and he did say that to that room of about maybe 65 or 70 people, he said, if there are issues with the Ministry of Health, you need to come to me. And the room went, ooh, because you're supposed to go to the LHIN. And I know we went to the LHIN looking at the opportunity of getting more beds, and they said no. Well, we certainly see what happened in the flip-flop with Walkerton and Hanover with regards to the issue that happened there about 3 weeks ago. He said, again, you come to me. And he repeated that comment. So I think we need to put this on the side for a while, Mr. Warden, and have that bigger discussion with the Ministry of Health and see where we need to go in the sense of the bigger problem and looking at how we can come up with solutions to the barriers instead of coming up with the barriers, Mr. Warden.
Okay, other comments regarding the report in front of you before we move on to the next report? Okay, seeing nothing, then we'll call the vote then on this, which is to receive Lynn's report. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Then that report is
No. Yeah, we shouldn't be discussing something.